Welcome to another Hangout on Air by Federico Ree, entrepreneurship coach and founder of Creative Entrepreneur. Morning, we are live, and my name is Federico Ree from Creative Entrepreneur in Melbourne, Australia. And in today's Hangout, I have again a very, very special guest. His name is David Burkett, and I'll introduce him very shortly. So in today's Hangout, we talk about Australia and its culture. And in fact, the title of today's Hangout is Australia is Poised for Greatness in 2016, but the key is culture. So I'm really interested to pick David's brain as far as understanding what his definition is to culture and the level of importance it has in the entrepreneurial business space, but also going further into the technology space. And if we elaborate one step further, we use words like artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, drones, simulation, gamification, and space. So without saying too much more, I'd like to formally introduce David. David, how are you?
Good, thank you, and thank you for having me.
That's an absolute pleasure. So David, let's tell the audience a little bit about what you do, apart from the brief introduction that I've made as the founder of Just Dream and also the founder of My Mentor. And you're also the executive producer of Disrupticon. Now, in a few words, what is Disrupticon?
So Disrupticon is a conference that fills in the gap in the technology conference space. At the moment, every technology event in the world is designed purely from the investor or the industry perspective, or even the startup community, and not necessarily designed for the average person who wants to see, feel, and touch the technology that's going to disrupt everyone's lives, not just business. And so from the perspective of bringing it to the masses, Disrupticon was designed to really begin to inspire people. So it's a series of conferences and events that will go on throughout the whole year, leading into a large scale conference later on in 2016.
Wow, sounds very, very innovative and pioneering. And what led you, or what inspired you to initiate this amazing event?
Well, I put on a technology conference last year at the Brisbane Convention Centre, where we brought in a world-famous nuclear scientist, and it was interesting to hear his perspective on Australia. It was an external perspective, and in fact, the Australian Financial Review picked up the story. And on the headline of the story, it read, Australia must embrace the technology-led era or face disaster. So it was talking about somebody from an outside perspective, looking in and saying, if you don't embrace technology, and if you don't make culture a key priority in what you do as a society, then you'll be completely left behind. And what that looks like can be quite devastating.
Sure. And I'm sure we are always looking abroad and observing what the leading nations around the world are doing, like the UK and America. And I'm sure there's a lot there that we can learn. I'm equally interested to understand or get your perspective on the achievements that Australia has made, nonetheless, in this particular year of 2015, in terms of accomplishments that we've made, in the space of maybe technology and disruption, for that matter. What are a few things that maybe come to mind first for you, David?
It's really interesting because a lot of the technology is in trial mode at the moment, and Australia is quite famous for being an incredible testing ground to world-breaking technology. And we can cite specific examples, even dating back to the moon landing, where Australia was at the forefront of all things relating to space and exploration in space. And so we've developed a reputation from the 60s that led into the development of Wi-Fi, FPOS, Medicare, and a whole bunch of other technologies that are used in both across various industries, including finance, including which is now known as fintech, across mining as well, in advanced manufacturing. And so there's a lot of inventions and developments within industry that go largely unnoticed, or isn't really brought to the masses. And I think that events like DisruptorCon and others really sort of highlight the achievements of Australia, because we do have a little bit of a culture where we sort of don't play up on our strengths, which is probably something that the United States do very well, which is highlight what they do well, and they popularize it through popular media such as Hollywood and the like.
It's interesting what you've said about culture and America, and I come back and think about the tall poppy syndrome, which certainly has existed in the Australian marketplace since I've been around in business, and from personal experience has certainly challenged me as far as achieving success or the desire to be successful, and pretty much breaking the mold and following your own path that is different to what the masses are doing. In terms of that tall poppy syndrome, do you believe it's still very present, or do you think that it has significantly reduced over time?
I think that there are, we can cite some very specific examples in the 80s and 90s where it was, incredibly prevalent, which is why we developed an international relationship, an international reputation for the tall poppy syndrome. But since then, I think that there's been some incredible advancements, especially with young people who sort of cut through and really tell it how it is. When Uber disrupted the cab industry in 36 months, went from idea to disrupting an entire industry in 36 months. Really what they were saying is that, okay, here's a system and a way of doing things, and that's the traditional view of doing it, but let's look at something completely different. And so it gave the power back to the user, and rather than the corporates, the very select few, which the tall poppy syndrome was birthed from, right? Because I even recall one very famous entrepreneur from the US. He was one of the original pioneers in construction and in the steel and manufacturing. And he, Dale Carnegie, famous guy, one of the original billionaires out of the US, he said that in terms of competition, I don't condone it, and I wish it was outlawed. So that was only less than in one lifetime ago. We're seeing massive changes in industry and commerce and the advancement of communication. I think people are starting to take back their liberties, and I think part of that is doing away with some of the old hat thinking, so that new fresh blood can come through, and then we can begin to look at business in an entirely different way, and even look at ourselves in an entirely different way. I think that there are parts of tall poppy syndrome that still exist, but I think that we can begin to very easily maneuver our way through that to really bring things to the masses in a way that they would love to receive it. They're the true dictator and author of what's happening in the marketplace. They're the ones that create any market.
Interesting perspective. I think the best antidote to the tall poppy syndrome is simply entrepreneurship. And in relation to that word, where do you think we are advancing the most in that space? Do you think that the small business sector is benefiting mostly from the entrepreneurial advances and technology and innovation, or do you think it's also spreading fast enough into the larger organization? What's your intake on that?
If you look at the fundamentals of what an entrepreneur is, it's somebody who is adventurous, and they see something that other people don't see necessarily. And they make an opportunity out of what people don't see. And so if you look at Steve Jobs, who's a classic example, he's looking at the future of technology and how it can adapt into everybody's daily life. And so his vision was quite grandiose at the time. In fact, I spoke to an Australian journalist who interviewed him in the early 90s. And he said that, in his own words, I walked away from the meeting thinking this guy is absolutely crazy, because the future that he was describing seemed absolutely impossible. Yet he recanted the story word for word, and it's exactly what we're living out today with the iPhone and with the iPad and with the PC. And at that particular moment, we were just trying to get the mouse and the keyboard right. And so I think entrepreneurs are the catalyst to change. I think and to all advancement, and it's our most valuable pool of resource in any nation. When we look at the foundings of the land of opportunity, it was, the race to stake a claim on land. In Australia, it was, the gold rush era. Let's go and be adventurous. Let's explore uncharted territories, and let's look at opportunities in those spaces. And that spirit is still very much alive in Australia. The true grit, underdog, Aussie battler spirit is very much alive, and I believe it's much stronger than some of the things that are not so positive, such as tall poppy. So if we focus in on that and we look at it, we see that we have an incredible pool of resource that is, we would probably describe it as largely untapped. We call it potential power.
Fascinating. And it's interesting when you talk about the gold rush and Australia's history, which really is very, very small in terms of years. Maybe it's 50 years or 80 years perhaps. And we look at the gold rush, we look at the wool industry, we look at the sugarcane industry. Obviously, mining was probably the latest, biggest change. In terms of 2015, what would you say has been the biggest industry sector that has grown, which we can sort of tag on to that list of other industries that we definitely benefited from in the past, that was and is much envy to the other nations around the world?
Well, one of the biggest buzzwords at the moment is disruption, and people are absolutely aghast at the level of change that can occur in such a short period of time because of technology. And it is a bit of a new version of the gold rush era, where anybody can stake a claim and crank out massive results in a very short period of time. And those pools of resources are available to everybody. So when in 2008, when there was a recession and everybody was counting on their jobs for their livelihood to pay their mortgages, when that occurred and there was massive losses, especially in the US, you saw a massive amount of people that began to start their own businesses, and there was a new wave of people who were entering the entrepreneurship space for the first time. And it was birthed out of absolute necessity. So what we're delving into, because of the advancement of technology, is the need to adapt, to help others to adapt. And anything that's birthed out of those industries will have massive potential. So if you just talk about one, let's talk about 3D printing. Because there's so many disruptive technologies that we can talk about. But let's just talk about disruptive 3D printing. I know somebody in Brisbane that today is printing bricks. So instead of the traditional way of making a brick, this gentleman is printing bricks and selling them. Okay?
Interesting.
And that doesn't seem like a massive deal, but what they are now talking about is printers that will be able to print a building from beginning to end. So we're talking about high-rise buildings being printed completely from 3D printers. And even though that sounds very sci-fi, it's already in the makings. So the best quote that after I said that, the best quote that I can give you is, we are living in a time now when the people who say it's impossible are being quickly interrupted by people who are already doing it. And so the speed and the rate of change is going to see a massive demand for people with leadership skills, with wisdom, with the entrepreneurial spirit that can seize the opportunities and take that technology that largely comes from the scientists and the innovators who don't understand how to bring it to market. Yep. There's an incredible opportunity to test things in Australia and to take them to the world. So I see Australia really as a facilitator of these massive changes that are going to happen around the world. It was a facilitator even for Wi-Fi and FPOS, and it can be for the disruptive technologies that are in the future and that are occurring today. We do have the resource and the intelligent workforce here in Australia to be able to do that, and it seems like a reckless thing to do, I believe, is just to depend on the most Neanderthal business of all time, which is, here is a rock and give me money for that rock. We have a very intellectual base. We have wonderful elements about our society. We have a great environment to live in and to work in. And people are envious of what we have, and it's time for us to now recognize it and take advantage of anything that has to do with the technology that is going to disrupt everything. And I've only mentioned one, but there are several others.
So certainly the landscape is looking promising for Australia, and obviously looking ahead into 2016 and the future. Your words perfectly describe the environment that Australia will be in if we keep on pushing and innovating and changing. Just for the viewers, I'm speaking to David Burkett. He's the founder of My Mentor and also Just Dream, but he's also the executive producer of Disrupticon. We are talking about Disrupticon as far as innovation and technology, and there is a Leaders and Thinkers Conference happening next year. One interesting point that David raised, or what really has resonated for me today, is the gold rush, or today's gold rush for Australia really hinges on innovation and change, and that culture that we need to really leverage on. Australia has certainly grown and benefited from, the gold rush, from the wool trade and the mining industry and so forth. But now there's an opportunity for us to really benefit from that entrepreneurial space, to the envy of many other leading nations. So, David, in terms of where you see 2016, what is one thing that you're ultimately betting on next year in terms of what you think will definitely happen that other countries should take notice of?
Well, I believe that 2016 is a great year for Australia. I think that in terms of technology and embracing technology, we are known for early adopters of technology that is now global, but was originally tested here in Australia. I think that we have a great size of community in terms of and pool of knowledge-based workers that we can begin to look at our strengths and look at launching things from Australia. There's a massive pool of money that's coming out of Asia that at the moment it's being used perhaps more towards real estate than our pool of entrepreneurs. But I believe the real potential is in entrepreneurship. And so if you're not involved in any community that touches and hinges on innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship, I think that you should begin to consider it. And I think that you should start the conversation, because whether you like it or not, it's going to affect your life. It's going to affect your children's lives. Just earlier on this year, I spoke to a gentleman who wrote the book, how, why jobs are going to take all your jobs, why robots are going to take all your jobs, and why it's okay. And so even after writing a book like that, which was endorsed by Google, he sees hope and an array of sunshine even after the robots begin to take a lot of our traditional jobs. And so if you don't know about the technology, you don't know what's going on, you have a responsibility to the future generations to show them what's happening, get them inspired by it, and show them what's actually available to them in terms of pursuing something around this space. We know that STEMs is a massive topic in government today. It's not just technology and innovation, it's also the massive worldwide shortage of this actual knowledge base, which we should, and we have a responsibility to invest into today. The reason why we have that shortage is because some of us here in Australia were a bit short-sighted in seeing the potential power of disruptive technology.
Interesting, and I like the reference to robotics, which is an interest of mine, and I think about the Terminator. So should the workforce be intimidated by robots going forward into the future, or do we see this as a brilliant opportunity to create new ideas and new markets, I guess?
I'm speaking to a lot of businesses who are speaking now disruption. They're even internally sending out emails and talking about what can we do that is disruptive. Even the most traditional businesses, such as law firms, accountancy firms, and engineering firms, are looking at what does disruption actually mean for us. And so it's a buzzword. It's happening right now. There's an opportunity there to begin to help business unpack what it actually means for them and how they can begin to develop a culture, which really disruption comes from previous terms. But one term that we can definitely relate to is entrepreneurship. And an entrepreneur continually reinvents himself to meet the demand of his day. And so, and businesses need to be looking at that consistently and constantly anyway. So disruption is just a part of natural organic growth of the human race. But for us, we need to begin to look at it and really see how it affects us personally, and stake a claim ourselves, and look at it as a very hopeful future for us, because as far as the doomsday people are concerned, there is no hope. But as far as the entrepreneur is concerned, there's nothing but opportunity in the marketplace right now.
I like it. And I guess the hope is that perhaps Australia can be the next Japan, in terms of what Japan experienced, say, in the 1970s with robotics and automation. And I'm definitely, putting up my hand for that. So just to wrap up with regards to Disrupticon and its conference, you talk about robotics quite a lot. Where would you place your bets as well, as far as artificial intelligence, 3D printing, drone simulation, and gamification and space? What would be another one that you would definitely put your bet on?
One that we haven't really spoken about is biotechnology and nanotechnology. And what's happening now is a lot of the technologies that you're talking about are actually having an overlap with other technologies. And so Xero is a famous accountancy software that was birthed out of Australia. They host a conference called XeroCon every year. The latest XeroCon conference, they mentioned how artificial intelligence was going to begin to predict the way that you manage your own finances and begin to automate things for you in advance. So they're already talking the language of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And so any technology that you mentioned is actually going to affect every industry, whether they like it or not. And so it's not one or the other, it's how they come together to serve the needs of the people. And so, and the classic tale for the entrepreneur is, how do we solve a problem? What's your problem, and how can we solve it for you? And really, technology, we have to remember, is a tool to help us to face our grand challenges and our problems. And it's up to us to see how we can utilize the technology and how we can implement it in such a way that your everyday person can relate to it, understand it, and actually benefit from its use.
I like the philosophy and your advice about coming together, and it really is about teamwork, and we can achieve great things as a nation, and even within an organization there needs to be teamwork and collaboration. So I guess to wrap up this session shortly, the buzzword is really disruption, and in relation to your forthcoming event next year, who does it attract particularly, and who should be applying to actually attend this conference?
It's a 2-day conference, and day one is for absolutely everyone, even people who are not interested in technology. And I say this, lightheartedly, because the reality is, if you start talking to a robot and the robot starts talking back, I think everybody can find some sort of fascination in that. But really, beyond the fascination point and beyond the interest point of getting people inspired about the technology that's going to shape the future and their individual lives, this is something that impacts everyone. And so we need to have conferences and events that can actually be brought to the masses. Day one is absolutely for absolutely everyone. And that includes primary school children, by the way, because we're hearing great feedback from our technology conferences from little children who weren't inspired by science before and now are. And so this is very, very important work for us and for future generations to create some sustainability there for us. But then day two would be the symposium, and the symposium is designed for the people who want to go in a little bit deeper and a little bit further and begin to unpack disruption for them, either as a C-level executive or as an investor or as an entrepreneur. Begin to unpack it so that they can really poise themselves for greatness in 2016, because we are poised for greatness, and then launch from there. We are definitely an organization that invests in culture and collaboration, because if we don't have that, then we lose our way very, very quickly, and we see massive crashes around globally when we forget about humanity and collaboration. But once you have that right, then it's about exploration and moving forward and driving innovation in such a way, in such a passionate way, that the whole of the Southern Hemisphere, I believe, will begin to look at Australia for leadership.
Fabulous. So is this open to the world as well? Is it only for Australian businesses to participate?
There will be live streaming around the world. We've already spoken to other nations who are looking to capitalize on certain international business models and disruptive technologies. I cite some specific examples in Asia, such as Hong Kong and Singapore, who are constantly innovating everything that they do. And in South America now, there's a great push for innovation and technology and entrepreneurship. And so what Chile is doing now at the moment is, even in terms of funding entrepreneurs and attracting entrepreneurs worldwide, is even more advanced than what Australia is doing in terms of actual dollars. But we will be live streaming it, but we will be hosting it in Australia, and we'll be showcasing the talent pool that's available here and how you can partner with Australia to do great things internationally.
Great. So just to wrap up, David, I'd like you just to think about what is one statement you can make to our listeners as far as what they need to mostly take note of from today's session. I can certainly, add my 2 cents worth in terms of what I picked up today and what really resonated. For me, what resonated was that Australia has a tremendous opportunity to capitalize on innovation, on new trends, on entrepreneurship particularly. It is a fantastic testing ground. And also in collaboration with, the Asia Pacific, we have a tremendous opportunity to leverage on that workforce and that know-how and that technology. The buzzword is disruption, and it really is about, it's the new age gold rush that we once experienced in the history of Australia. So back to you, David. What is your key word or key statement you'd like to make before we finish up today?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is we have a responsibility for the existing and emerging generations to understand that these are the technologies that are going to lead our workforce and are going to provide opportunities for our children. And so that's definitely one, and that should be part and parcel of everything that we do, and it's embedded into our mission statement as well. But number 2 is begin to act. An entrepreneur, you look at the entrepreneur like the hero's journey in a Hollywood script, which is he'll go out there and try something and fail. And so we look at Australia and we look at certain negative attributes and negative things that people have thought about us in terms of, the tall poppy syndrome. In the United States, I know specifically that in certain innovation cities, they actually celebrate when people fail or when people fall down. And so, we need to really recognize. They actually take them out for a drink and say, "Well done for trying," and looking forward to see what you do next, because it proves something. It proves that you're moving forward. And this is what we do as entrepreneurs is we fail really, really well, really, really fast, so that we can help humanity move forward. So it is a lonely road, but it's an absolute must. And we do it before we are disrupted as a society, before the recession comes, before the letter comes in the mail, or before we get the tap on the shoulder and say you no longer have a job. The entrepreneur gets out there and is proactive about his life, about his future. And that's exactly the position that Australia is in. It has all the key ingredients for greatness. But as your title says, if we don't get the mentality and the culture thing right, then we will miss that opportunity. That train will leave the station and what's to be left behind is something that looks much worse than just poverty.
What great advice, David. You definitely have an excellent foresight, certainly an exciting foresight about the future of Australia, and your insight on what we now need to do to really go one step further or several steps further, and to really be noticed around the world is equally appealing to me as an entrepreneur. So I'd like to thank you sincerely, David, for your time and for your words of wisdom. And I certainly look forward to seeing your event come together and seeing the outcome of that, and hopefully being involved in it myself. So I'll wrap up, and again, thank you so much, David, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
For more of Federico's Hangouts on Air, please visit www.creativeentrepreneur.com.au.